Let's do that. No. Yeah, that's kind of dope. Let's see that. The historical evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. This chapter will present one of several arguments that believing in Jesus on the evidence we have is inconsistent with comparable supernatural cases we reject. Many people who believe in the resurrection and who think the evidence makes it reasonable already have a set of epistemic standards that would lead them to deny the resurrection if they were to apply these standards consistently. Ironically, we typically disbelieve many supernatural claims that have far more evidence and better quality evidence in their favor. Before we consider one of those cases, it will be useful to summarize some of the reasons frequently given in favor of the historical resurrection argument. A vast amount has been written about the historical evidence for Jesus. There is no need to survey many of those arguments or to pursue some of the more arcane details and disputes from the literature here. The sorts of objections I have will apply to a broad class of the pro-historical arguments without our needing to delve into some of the more scholastic minutiae. The arguments focus most heavily on the accounts of Jesus' resurrection given in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and to a lesser extent on the writings of Paul. Defenders of the historical argument have emphasized both claims made in the manuscripts and facts about the writings themselves. They say there were multiple eyewitness accounts of the miracles of Jesus, not just a few isolated people. Hundreds or even thousands of people have purported to have witnessed the resurrected Jesus healing the sick, raising the dead, and feeding the hungry. When Jesus was crucified, he wasn't buried in secret. The tomb was widely known and accessible. Given the public nature of the event, if his corpse had not actually disappeared, then a story about his resurrection would have been very difficult to fake. A number of people are reported to have found the tomb empty. On several different occasions, different groups of people are purported to have experienced Jesus resurrected from the dead. The witnesses are not a homogeneous group of religious zealots. They are from diverse backgrounds with different educations and social standings. They are not a strange or fringe group. It's highly unlikely that the witnesses had any ulterior motives, it has been argued, because they stood to gain nothing from retelling what they had seen. In fact, they stood to lose a great deal. Early Christians were socially ostracized for their beliefs, persecuted, and perhaps even killed. While people will sometimes follow mistaken causes with deep passion and commitment, more often than not, they are unwilling to sacrifice their lives for them. The original disciples believed that Jesus rose from the dead despite their having every reason not to. The notion of a physical resurrection was alien to them. Such an event would have been outlandish, yet they still believed. They were so convinced that out of their dedication, they gave up their jobs, wealth, possessions, and even families. The people closest to the eyewitnesses believed them and were impressed enough to convert. The passion and conviction of the original believers was so profound that it conquered the doubts of all those around them. A whole religious movement, which has lasted for thousands of years and spread to millions of people, sprang from these few eyewitness accounts. Furthermore, many of the events of the New Testament have been historically corroborated, say the historical resurrection defenders. Archaeologists, historians, and other scholars have been able to find a great deal of independent evidence confirming many of the historical claims in the Bible, such as the reign of Herod, the destruction of the Jewish temple, and the growth of the early Christian church. The Gospels focus on a real historical person. They are not comparable to a book of mythology or fairy tales like Paul Bunyan. They present their accounts as factual records of events in history, not as allegory or fiction. Furthermore, the Jewish tradition of orally transmitting information accurately and reliably was highly developed and successful. Paul, who previously was an ardent persecutor of Christians, claims to have seen the resurrected Jesus on several occasions. In fact, since he wrote many books of the Bible, his account must be an immediate one given by someone claiming to have seen Jesus. He must have been utterly convinced to have so radically changed his mind about Christianity. Once we consider all these factors, say the defenders of the historical resurrection, no other hypothesis can explain the story of Jesus as well. Gary Habermas has presented a popular recent version of the argument. In addition to making many of the points already mentioned, he argues that many people who were enemies of the early Christian movement, such as the Jewish leaders, failed to contest the empty tomb in the stories we have about the resurrection. The absence of their denials in the historical sources is relevant, Habermas says, because if they had rejected the story, their protests would be evident. Furthermore, when Jesus' followers are alleged to have seen him after his death, it created a radical transformation in these followers' lives. The followers were utterly convinced, and many critical scholars concur that they were convinced. Furthermore, as Habermas sees it, the failure of naturalistic explanations fortifies the case for the supernatural answer, a real resurrection. For example, he offers this list of objections to the hallucination explanation, a commonly proposed naturalistic alternative to Jesus' actually returning from the dead. For example, hallucinations are private experiences, while clearly we have strong reasons to assert that groups of people claim to have seen Jesus. Number two, the disciples' despair indicates that they were not in the proper frame of mind to see hallucinations. Number three, perhaps the most serious problem is that there were far too many different times, places, and personalities involved in the appearances. To believe that with each of these varying persons and circumstances, a separate hallucination occurred borders on credulity. Number four, further on this view, Jesus' body should still have been located safely in the tomb. Number five, hallucinations very rarely transform lives, but we have no record of any of the eyewitnesses recanting their faith. Two huge problems are the conversions of both Paul and James, neither of whom had a desire to see Jesus. These are just a very few of the serious questions for this alternative view. All other proposed natural hypotheses have similarly been disproven. Problems with the naturalistic alternatives, such as these with the hallucinations explanation, point to Jesus' actual return from the dead. The more thoroughly the natural hypotheses fail, the more likely are the historical resurrection appearances. To state this principle more briefly as a mock mathematical equation, given a reasonable explanation, the disciples' experiences plus the failure of alternative equals the historical resurrection appearances of Jesus. So, the aforementioned summary and some of the details from Habermas give us an abbreviated picture of common historical arguments for Jesus. The authors focus on some of the inclusions and omissions in the texts. They triangulate with common sense about human nature. They reason that when the full list of the considerations they emphasize are taken into account, the competing naturalistic hypotheses fail, leaving the miraculous resurrection of Jesus as the last best explanation. In the next chapter, we will consider some psychological research concerning hallucinations, the neurological effects of bereavement, and aspects of eyewitness testimony and memory that undermine the type of argument Habermas is making here. But for now, let us consider the broader question of accepting miraculous, supernatural, or magical events on the basis of historical evidence. What can we learn from other historical cases, like the story of Jesus' resurrection? The Salem witch trials. Between 1692 and 1693, so about a year, Dozens of people were accused, were arrested, stood trial, and were tortured or hanged for various acts of witchcraft, possession by devils, and other supernatural ill deeds in Salem, Massachusetts. The events, the events began with the strange behavior of some little girls, which fed suspicions. The girls had been seen running around and freezing in grotesque postures, complaining about biting and pinching sensations, and having violent seizures. As suspicions grew, people claimed to have witnessed a number of miraculous occurrences, such as acts of witchcraft, inflictions of blindness and sickness through the use of spells and human flight. Ultimately, over 150 people were accused. William Phipps, the governor of Massachusetts at the time, got involved. A court was established with judges, prosecutors, defenders, and a large number of respected members of the community. Thorough investigations were conducted. Witnesses were carefully cross-examined. A large body of evidence was meticulously gathered. Many people confessed. The entire proceedings were carefully documented with thousands of sworn affidavits, court documents, interviews, and related papers. In the end, 19 people, including Bridget Bishop, Sarah Good, Rebecca Nurse, and Giles Corey, were tried, sentenced, and executed. In most people's minds, the Salem witch trials are a frightening example of how enthusiasm, hysteria, social pressure, anxiety, and religious fervor can be powerful enough to lead ordinary people to do extraordinary and mistaken things. The term witch hunt has become synonymous with an irrational and emotionally heated persecution. Suppose we were to consider the hypothesis that the women accused of performing magic at Salem really were witches. That is, suppose they possess some supernatural powers or the ability to harness forces beyond the nature realm or the natural realm to make magical events happen. The interesting and crucial questions for us are: what is the state of our evidence when taken as support for this hypothesis? Does our evidence justify concluding that there was real magic at Salem? Much can be said for the supernatural explanation. First, hundreds of people were involved in concluding that some of the accused were witches. Eyewitnesses testified in court, signed sworn affidavits, and demonstrated their utter conviction that those on trial were witches. Furthermore, the accusers came from diverse backgrounds and social strata, including magistrates, judges, the governor of Massachusetts, respected members of the community, husbands of the accused, and so on. They all became passionately convinced that the charges were true on the basis of what they had seen. The witnesses, accusers, and investigators had a great deal to lose by being correct. Men would lose their wives, children would lose their mothers, community members would lose friends they cared about. It seems very unlikely that such accusers would have had ulterior motives, leading them to such a dramatic and profound conclusion. Accusing a friend or a wife of being a witch very likely would have the horrible outcome of getting her executed. How good was the evidence gathering process at the time? The trials were part of a thorough, careful, and exhaustive investigation. The investigators deliberately gathered evidence and made a substantial attempt to view it objectively and separate truths from falsehoods, mistakes, and lies. In the court trials, they took great care to discern the facts. The accusers must have been convinced by their evidence. Why else would so many people agree and act so decisively and with such conviction? It strains credibility to suggest there was a conspiracy or a mass hallucination shared by the hundreds of people involved. The same hallucination cannot be had by large groups of people. Or, according to Habermas, one doesn't hallucinate something one doesn't wish to see. What about the state of the evidence as it was passed to us centuries later? That there were witch trials in Salem and that many people were put to death has been thoroughly corroborated with a range of other historical sources. The witch trials were historically recent, so we have hundreds of the actual documents that were part of the evidence. We have the signed, sworn testimonies of the eyewitnesses claiming to have seen the magic performed, not as it was repeated and relayed for decades to others, but immediately after it occurred. We have whole volumes written by witnesses to the trials, such as those by Cotton Mather and John Hale. How much evidence do we have? Enough to fill a truck. Modern archives at the University of Virginia and elsewhere have thousands of documents, books, records, transcripts, affidavits, testimonials, and other works detailing the events. That there were witch trials convicting the accused women is beyond a shadow of a historical doubt. But they weren't witches. Of course, I'm not making a serious case for real witchcraft at Salem. I do not think you should conclude that the accused were really witches. Real witchcraft is one of the possible hypotheses that could explain the events in Salem, but it is not the best or most probable one. The point is that they were not witches, and you probably do not believe that they were, based on the substantial body of historical evidence. If we take seriously the attempts to prove the resurrection of Jesus on historical grounds, then in order to be consistent, we must also accept that the Salem witches actually performed acts of black magic. In fact, the Salem comparison has an ironic result. When it is put up against the case for the resurrection, in the important respects, the historical evidence for witchcraft is better than the historical argument for the resurrection. In the case of Salem, the trials were a mere 300 years ago, not 2,000. For Salem, we have thousands of actual documents surrounding the incidences, including the sworn testimonies from people claiming to have seen the magic performed. In contrast, we do not have any of the original Gospels, only copies from centuries later. The events in Salem were actively investigated by thoughtful, educated, and relatively modern people. The supposedly possessed girls were repeatedly examined and interviewed. A large number of people devoted a great deal of time and energy to carefully examine the cases, and they concluded that whatever was going on must be of supernatural origin. As we saw in chapter 2, the gospel stories are only a few anecdotal hearsay stories from passionate and committed religious adherents, passed by word of mouth for decades through an unknown number of people before being written down. All that remains of those stories are copies of copies from decades or even centuries later that were actively culled and patched together from a wide range of more varied writings. Okay. By reasonable measures of quantity and quality, the evidence we have for witchcraft at Salem is vastly better than the evidence we have for the magical return from the dead by zombie Jesus. But despite the better evidence, it is simply not reasonable to believe that the women in Salem were really witches or that they really performed magic. No reasonable person with a typical 21st century education should believe, even though some of the accused were tried, convicted, and executed for witchcraft, that they were really witches. The comparison between the historical resurrection of Jesus and the Salem witch trials should produce a great deal of cognitive dissonance for the historically minded Christian. You cannot consistently accept Jesus as returning from the dead while rejecting the magical powers of the Salem witches. Something's got to give. There are at least 3 ways someone might respond in an attempt to reconcile the cases. Response 1, bite the bullet. First, he might achieve consistency by lowering his threshold of required evidence for extraordinary supernatural events to the point that he accepts both the resurrection of Jesus and the magical powers of the Salem witches. Indeed, there will be some who believe that supernatural forces, magic, and spiritual phenomena are quite common, so acknowledging real witchcraft at Salem may not seem that troubling. The bite the bullet response resolves the incongruity between Salem and Jerusalem by accepting magic in both. When I first conceived of the Salem witch trials argument and began discussing it with believers, I confess I did not take this response very seriously. The possibility of real witchcraft at Salem struck me as obviously mistaken, and I expected that the majority of believers would argue that the Jesus and Salem cases are disanalogous. Okay, but after interacting with thousands of people in public lectures, in classes, on my blog, and in interviews and podcasts, I have been greatly surprised to find that this is one of the more common responses for the dedicated Christian. I've been forced to conclude that either these believers' dedication to the Christian ideology is deep enough to push them to bite the bullet, or there's far more belief in real magic out there than I once imagined. Why shouldn't we accept the presence of real magic at Salem? There are a number of problems with the bite the bullet response. The biggest problem is that it resolves the incongruity between Salem and Jerusalem by accepting magic at Salem, but the best explanation of the Salem case does not involve real magic. Okay. First, the magic thesis would somehow have to fit with the views of historians and scholars arguing for various naturalistic explanations. Of course, there are experts, and then there are experts. Okay, it's almost always possible to find someone with some credentials arguing for an outrageous position. Consider what I'm doing in this book. And disagreeing with experts may not be very troubling. They make mistakes like everyone else, and even the consensus view is wrong sometimes. But consider the widespread acceptance of the general claim among the people who are best qualified to evaluate the quality of historical evidence that something natural, not supernatural, happened at Salem. Okay. Accepting magic at Salem puts one at odds with the expert's considerable brain power, credentials, and knowledge. And it raises this question: are my reasons for thinking the resurrection was real better than all the reasons for thinking magic at Salem wasn't? That is, which is better, my reasons for thinking that Jesus was supernatural, or my reasons for thinking that what happened at Salem was not supernatural? And accepting witchcraft in this case doesn't just run afoul of the consensus historical view about the events at Salem, it also wreaks havoc with a whole approach to history. Lowering the standards here requires lowering them across the board. If magic was real at Salem, then, by extension, so was demon possession during the Plague Years and the Inquisition in medieval Europe. Werewolves and vampire stories in history must also be treated as facts. Hexes, the evil eye, and spectral beings must be treated as real, historical phenomena. Kings, emperors, and religious leaders must also have magical powers. A second problem with the bite the bullet response is that acknowledging magic at Salem requires lowering our evidential threshold to unacceptable levels in too many other cases where it is unlikely. If both cases were real magic, then you must draw a similar conclusion in the thousands or even millions of other comparable cases. In Saudi Arabia, for example, investigations into and public trials involving charges of witchcraft or sorcery are quite routine and frequently result in guilty verdicts that are punished by execution. On YouTube, there are countless videos, a powerful form of evidence not available in the Jesus or Salem cases, of allegedly magical, spiritual, supernatural, and miraculous events occurring. In 1988, the African publication, the Kenya Times, reported thousands of people to have witnessed the second coming of Jesus. If magic was real in both Salem and Jerusalem, then it is incredibly common. If we are gullible enough to accept it in Salem, then we open the floodgates for cases that are surely not real. There are several problems with accepting this volume of magic in the world. Okay. To begin, in the vast majority of these cases, people make mistakes. We know that people get confused. They are easily swayed by sleight of hand tricks. They make mistakes. They are carried away by their enthusiasm. They are hopeful, and they are often just poor critical thinkers. For vivid debunkings and examples of common mistakes and deceptions, see the works of Michael Shermer, James Randi, Theodore Schick and Louis Vaughan, Stephen Law, Jonathan Barron, Carl Sagan, and Elizabeth Loftus, just to name a few. But the problems get worse for the Christian who bites the bullet. If the believer's response is that magic was real in both Salem and miracles were real in Jerusalem, and it is reasonable to believe on the basis of the historical evidence, then they open the door to thousands of other religious movements that presently that present comparably poor historical proof for their incompatible magic. Unless we cheat, there's no way to custom tailor the threshold for acceptable historical supernatural beliefs so that Christianity ends up as the only reasonable movement. Okay, you either get Christianity and a whole bunch of other religious movements, or you don't get any of them. Okay, the Christian won't want to accept all the other movements because so many of them, like Christianity, claim exclusivity. Lots of them, on the basis of their historical miracles, claim that theirs is the one true religion and the one true God, and all the others must be rejected as false. The Christian has a problem if the miraculous events authenticating another religious movement corroborate a religious ideology that is incompatible with Christianity. What can she say if that God is not the Christian God, or if that doctrine denies the truth of essential Christian claims? There's a comparable internal problem too. Many advocates of some particular Christian sect's doctrines are suspicious that various miracle claims from other Christian sects are unfounded. For example, a Jehovah's Witness, given his doctrinal commitments, will want to reject the authenticity of alleged Catholic miracles at Lourdes. If some Catholic miracles are real, then it would appear some of what the Jehovah's Witnesses has to say about the exclusivity of his religious interpretation of the Bible or their privileged connection to God must be mistaken. Baptists would want to reject Mormon miracles. How does the evangelical Christian, who explicitly denies the doctrines of other Christian denominations, explain the widespread occurrence of miracles in those churches that seem to legitimate their doctrines? Lowering one's criteria to allow the supernatural events at both Salem and Jerusalem brings along all the others. If we let them all in, then we have a hopeless mess of conflicting doctrines, theological incompatibilities, and a supernatural realm overrun with competing gods, saints, spirits, and forces. A reasonable person should not lower their threshold of acceptance to the point where all these demonstrably false or incompatible cases flood through the gates. The cost of doing so would result in being too gullible, too wrong, or too conflicted. It is difficult to avoid the conclusion that someone who would bite this bullet must be deep in the grip of an ideology. Accepting the ideas of Jesus' resurrection and magic at Salem forces one to accept a world teeming with spiritual and supernatural forces. On the believer's account, we inhabit a world that is filled with cell phones, rapid genetic analyses, sophisticated biochemical cancer treatments, handheld computers with 50 nanometer silicon-etched chips, planes flying at 7,000 miles per hour, and spacecraft capable of leaving the solar system. But it is also teeming with ghosts, demons, magical spells, miracles, fairies, elves, and psychic powers. Ultimately, this spooky worldview This spooky worldview in response to the Salem case will be disproved by its own peculiar and false accounts of natural and ordinary phenomena. If these supernatural things are so real and so common, then where are they? And why can't we find better evidence in their favor than the passionate testimonies of converts? Do they only manifest themselves when there are no credible witnesses or skeptics present? These questions should weigh heavily on someone who makes the bite the bullet response. We now have a staggering assemblage of evidence for causal closure, or the view that physical events or effects are fixed by a fully physical prior history. The physical realm, as far as we can ascertain, is causally complete. All physical effects can be accounted for by basic physical causes. Across the spectrum of scientific fields, we find no exceptions to causal closure. If the bite the bullet response is correct, then it seems we must deny causal closure on a massive scale. We must accept widespread instances of physical events being brought about by some non-physical entity or force. And if that's correct, then one of the central pillars of the natural sciences has been undermined. Now, one must ask, are my reasons for resurrection better than all the reasons we have for thinking that the entire scientific enterprise's naturalistic worldview is correct? If a decently educated 21st century adult is willing to say, yes, it's reasonable to believe on the basis of the witch trial evidence that Sarah Good, Rebecca Nurse, and the rest were actually witches, then I think we must take said admission to be a reductio of his view about the authenticity of the Jesus miracle stories. To be fair, there could be situations where believing in real witchcraft is reasonable. For at least some in Salem at the time, it may have been a fair conclusion to draw, given what else they knew, the context, their levels of education, the culture, as the beliefs of those around them. But the question is not about what was reasonable for the citizens of Salem to have believed. It is about what is reasonable to believe for the ordinary person of today. Okay. Response 2, deny the analogy. Alternately, the response to the Salem witch trials argument may be to deny the analogy. One may argue that the cases are different in some respects, that justifying denying witchcraft in Salem while accepting Jesus' resurrection. One might say there are important details in the case of Salem that are not present in the Jesus case, or there are powerful points in favor of Jesus that are not shared by the Salem example. So, on this view, accepting Jesus and rejecting Salem is not inconsistent because there is a principled separation of the cases. Denying the analogy is doomed to fail, however, by ad hoc rationalizing and special pleading. One problem is that any such approach will have to be reconciled with the fact that we have so much more information about the events in Salem. If someone wishes to argue that we are justified in concluding that there were naturalistic causes in Salem on the basis of the evidence, he faces a challenge when it comes to defending Jesus. He needs to argue that no similar naturalistic explanations can be true about Jesus on the basis of a much smaller, more fragmented, older, and less corroborated body of information. Attempts to rule out some alternative naturalistic explanation of the resurrection story will be undone by the fact that we have only a few stories recorded on the basis of unknown hearsay testimony decades after the fact. We just don't have enough good information about the events to rule out anything definitively. In contrast, since there is so much evidence available concerning Salem, there remains a better possibility of justifying some naturalistic explanation there. The lack of evidence in the Jesus case and the extent to which the accounts of Jesus have been cultivated, altered, and canonized will make it very difficult to rule out with any confidence some comparable naturalistic explanation. Denying the analogy runs into another problem. We don't need to be deeply committed to the Salem case in order to make the point. There are many other examples we can find where we can find a body of information as good as or better than the Jesus evidence supporting the conclusion that some supernatural event occurred, but it is not reasonable to draw such a conclusion. Hundreds of thousands of Hindus claim to have witnessed statues of the Lord Ganesh drinking milk. Millions of thoughtful, educated, fairly reasonable people have left the shrine in Lourdes, France, utterly convinced that they witnessed a miraculous healing. Gurus, New Age spiritualists, and other quasi-religious leaders gathered millions of devoted followers who become deeply convinced that their spiritual advisor possesses otherworldly powers. The original accounts of Islam, Mormonism, Buddhism, and Hinduism are filled with supernatural claims, and the circumstances surrounding their advents resemble Christianity in too many relevant respects. Whatever particular virtues may strike us about the historical resurrection case, there's a multitude of non-Jesus cases where the evidence is just as good or better by those criteria. But the reasonable view is to reject the magical conclusion. The general form of pro-historical arguments is something like this. A. The sources of historical evidence concerning event E has virtues X, Y, and Z. B. Virtues X, Y, and Z are adequate to warrant our believing the sources of historical evidence concerning event E. C. Therefore, we are warranted in believing that E occurred. Earlier in the chapter, I noted that my set of arguments against the resurrection is broad enough to make it unnecessary for us to delve too deeply into many of the details of the pro-historical arguments. Now we can see why. Generally stated, my argument is that it is possible for us to substitute a wide range of details into the first premise for virtues X, Y, and Z. We can model a variety of pro-resurrection arguments with very different emphasis and details in this general form. But what the cases of Salem, Lourdes, Mormonism, Islam, and the like show is that the presence of those virtues is not generally sufficient to warrant the supernatural conclusion. A defender of the historical case for Jesus' supernatural powers may emphasize this feature of the evidence or that one. He may present us with a selective list of what he takes to be the virtues of the Jesus evidence, justifying his conclusion that Jesus really had supernatural powers. Whatever those general features are, we must ask this question. In general, when the evidence has these features, is the best explanation the supernatural one? If the pro-historical defender approaches this question objectively, without any ad hoc qualifications in favor of the Christian conclusion, he'll be disappointed. He'll find numerous other cases where, one, we have a body of evidence as good as or better than the evidence for Jesus. Two, it is possible to tout the same virtues. For example, the numerous witnesses of high character, devotees with no apparent ulterior motive, utter conviction among the followers, the beginning of a worldwide movement, and so on. And yet, three, it is not reasonable to accept the supernatural conclusion in that other case. Advocates of the historical resurrection have sometimes argued that unless some naturalistic explanation can be successfully defended, then we must accept the supernatural conclusion. If the naturalistic explanations we can come up with are all doubtful, then the resurrection must be real. See, there's a mistake concealed in this seemingly reasonable approach. The Salem example illustrates the point that one need not believe or defend any particular alternative naturalistic explanation. Some scholars have argued that many of the residents of Salem had eaten rotten rye grain that caused them to hallucinate. But it can be reasonable to think that there were no real witches at Salem, even without knowing exactly what happened. In fact, in historical matters, there's always much we do not know. The Salem case shows that we don't need to have a fully articulated naturalistic explanation in place with the supporting evidence to believe reasonably that there is such an explanation. Even if it turns out that a number of proposed naturalistic hypotheses do not readily fit with what we believe are the facts about the case, it would not follow from those failures alone that we should default to the supernatural explanation as the best hypothesis. At this point in history, we have seen countless examples of allegedly strange or remarkable phenomena that resisted our attempts at explanation. We have also seen countless cases of events where it was alleged something miraculous occurred. Then later, when we continued to pursue it, or after we learned more about ourselves and the world, the answers became clear to us. The real source of the bubonic plague, not demon possession or God's wrath for our sinfulness, wouldn't become clear to us for several centuries until the plague bacillus was discovered. Likewise, no one in Salem or in Europe during the Inquisition years could have known about Sydenham's chorea, a disease caused by streptococcus infections and rheumatic fever. Many months after initial infection, its victims, usually young girls, would have been seized by rapid, uncoordinated jerking movements in their feet, hands, and faces. The evidence in favor of causal closure is vast. This is not to rule out a magical explanation a priori, It remains a possibility, I suppose. But clearly, the threshold of proof for reasonable people is and should be very high before magic becomes the best among all competing hypotheses. History has taught us there is a very strong presumption in favor of naturalistic causes. And not even the copious body of evidence for real witchcraft at Salem is enough to exceed that threshold. A fortiori, the paltry body of evidence we have in favor of Jesus' resurrection certainly does not achieve the threshold. Among other things, the Salem witch trials show it is possible to meet an even heavier burden of proof than what we have for the resurrection of Jesus, and it remains unreasonable to believe anything magical happened. No clear-headed person should accept that doubts about the naturalistic explanation imply Jesus coming back from the dead is the only reasonable conclusion. We don't have a priori that only natural events occurred in 35 CE. Surely there must be some threshold of evidence that could, in principle, make it reasonable to believe Jesus was resurrected, but the evidence we have falls very short. Response 3, evidence doesn't matter. Of course it doesn't. Evidence doesn't matter to MAGA. Evidence doesn't matter to Christians. It's just fifis across the board. Anyway, when confronted by the Salem case, the believer may simply refuse to accept arguments that do not corroborate the resurrection of Jesus. As it turns out, once we scratch the surface, some of the allegedly historical arguments for Jesus are more like exercises in confirmation bias than objective historical investigations. For many, the possibility that Jesus was not resurrected is simply a non-starter. Noted advocate of the historical resurrection N.T. Wright suggests this is the view of history held by Luke T. Johnson, Christopher Seitz, H. Fry, and others. According to this view, the problems with the historical evidence show not that there was no resurrection, but that our approach to history is wrong. If we attempt to argue for the historical truth of the resurrection on standard historical grounds, have we not allowed historical method, perhaps including its hidden enlightenment roots, to become Lord, to set the bounds of what we know, rather than allowing God himself, Jesus himself, and indeed the resurrection itself, to establish not only what we know, but what we can know it? But how we can know it? In Reasons Within the Bounds of Religion, Nicholas Walterstorff says, the religious beliefs of the Christian scholar ought to function as control beliefs within the devising and weighing of theories. Since his fundamental commitment to following Christ ought to be decisively ultimate in his life, the rest of his life ought to be brought into harmony with it. As control, the belief content of his authentic commitment ought to function both negatively and positively. Negatively, the Christian scholar ought to reject certain theories on the grounds that they conflict or do not comport well with the belief content of his authentic commitment. That is, since Jesus must come first, the only acceptable historical methods for proving Jesus was real must be ones proving he was real. If our historical methods do not produce the correct conclusion, then it must be the methods, not the conclusion, that are wrong. Once this pernicious circularity is exposed, it casts the historical question in an entirely new light. It turns out these believers aren't really playing by the same rules. If the believer simply refuses to take seriously the Salem argument, the causal closure problem, or the long list of other problems with the historical case, then I think we must conclude this person is more committed to believing in the resurrection than accepting that which is best supported by the evidence. Okay. Indeed, some believers have openly announced this as their intention. They are thereby rejecting the basic presumption of the iniquity of the, They are thereby rejecting the basic presumption of the inquiry in this book. In that case, they and I aren't disagreeing about the historical evidence for the resurrection anymore. Perhaps they are someone who, like William Lane Craig, has resolved to subordinate reason to faith. The way in which I know that Christianity is true is first and foremost on the basis of the witness of the Holy Spirit in my heart. And this gives me a self-authenticating means of knowing that Christianity is true, wholly apart from the evidence. According to Dr. Craig, faith must be held immune from the doubts induced by the shifting sands of evidence and reason. Craig, who has also extensively argued for the resurrection on historical grounds, insists this special sense gives him indefeasible, inerrant knowledge no historical contingencies could possibly refute. If we were to take seriously this view about subordinating reason to his religious commitment, then we have to conclude that his historical arguments for the resurrection are disingenuous. We would all be better served by believers being this forthright about what their priorities are when it comes to Christian ideology and historical methodology. The historical facts, according to them, are irrelevant. This sort of believer has resolved to doubt everything else before doubting the authenticity of the Jesus story. This illuminates what I meant by the commitment earlier in the chapter of one being deep in the grip of an ideology. There really can be no useful discussion about what is reasonable or even what is true with such a person. They have left the rationality playing field. Craig is correct, however, in concluding that the only way to sustain one's belief in the resurrection is to disregard the evidence. Conclusion: no witchcraft in Salem, no return from the dead in Jerusalem. We've seen that the only plausible response to the Salem argument is to reject the reality of the resurrection in parallel with our rejection of magic. It is internally inconsistent, at odds with the evidence, and unjustified to think Jesus returned from the dead. All things considered, and by the standards of evidence we already employ elsewhere, one should believe that the overall likelihood of some naturalistic explanation is greater than the resurrection. But many questions remain unanswered. Why exactly should the threshold for historical supernatural claims be so high? Why should there be a prima facie preference for a naturalistic explanation over a supernatural one? Why have so many people been convinced by the resurrection? Why are so many people disposed to believe in miracles? What do we know about the psychological makeup of the early Christians that would bear on our accepting their stories? In the next chapter, we'll consider evidence that has come to light in modern psychology and our studies of human cognition that answer some of these questions. In particular, what do we know about the way people think now that could shed light on the beliefs of the early Christians and their reliability in transmitting the resurrection story to us? Chapter 4, Believing the Believers. And that's where I'm going to pause, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to pause for the obligatory cause because I need some coffee, like yesterday. And consequently, a cigarette. Although, to be fair, I didn't actually need either of those things. Okay. My dopamine receptors are like, excuse me, we would like a cigarette, please. We would also like some coffee. And by that, I mean, we would like nicotine and caffeine. Not necessarily in that order, but definitely ASAP. Let me pause right there. Hold on. Where's my fucking bookmark at, dog? Petunia P. Oh, here we go. Great combo, coffee and cigs. All right, goddamn it. Man, made it brighter in this bitch. I knew it. Damn it. Cigarettes. Ew. I must have left them in my truck. Fuck. Oh, here go one. Score. My backyard and shit. Did you jammer? That's what's up. You gotta fight for your right to party. That's right. The king has friends that are kings. What? I do be dancing, Kyle, just for like, even though I can't dance. What's up, foolish gamer? I need to get some coffee. We just heard the damn microwave go off. Yeah. Caramel? Hell no, son. Oh, you said camel. I need some Buddha. I mean, I got that too. You know what I'm saying? Keep that. Ooh, shit. Yo. Nah, this is just a cigarette. It's a brown cigarette. Why, man? Get out of my business. Womp womp. Right, damn it. I can't smoke at this time. I'm at work. I feel you, team man. I was reading a book. That book was recommended by the author of the last book I was reading, because he used that book as source material for his book. So I'm like, well, shit, I need that book then. So I got that book. It's called Atheism, the Case Against Christ, you know. And basically he's saying that by the end of the book, he hopes to convince you that there is no God and that Jesus is just a myth or some shit or legend. He already made some pretty compelling arguments. Like, I see why dude used it as source material. I should have probably microwaved that a little longer. Oh no, it's going. Look at Rosie. Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. Oh, shut the fuck up. on, Rosie, you know you ain't going outside. I don't know why you... No, you ain't going outside. I think that's enough sugar. Oh my God. I got 4 cats. 4 motherfucking cats. Am I hearing venom here or? What you mean? Look at your cornhole. I gotta find your brothers. Where's Dade B and Lou P? Oh, there they go. Y'all niggas gay. Look at him. Wooey. Dade B. He knocked the fuck out. Dade B. Dade B is asleep. Where Petunia at? There's only 3 of them. I'm trying to find the 4th one. Oh, there go your motherfucking ass. I tell you. You're on YouTube. I was showing the people. Don't go back to sleep. I'm talking to you. I was showing the people your excuse me. I was showing the people your kids. Okay. I gotta bother you because you be bothering me like every morning. You do. Don't act brand new. You know you do. You want me to stop? You want me to keep you? You look bad. All right, I'll leave you alone. There wasn't enough sugar in my coffee. Lucky Tabby Kitten. Lucky Tabby Kitten said hi, Rosie. Rosie. Lucky Tabby Kitten said hello. Well, whatever. I guess she doesn't give a fuck. I have a blue Burmese, and she has a daughter, but I'm not sure what the dad was. That's what I'm like. I don't know what the dad was of these cats either, because Petunia, like, you know what I'm saying, was like a feral cat or whatever. You know what I mean? And she had these motherfuckers. Litter gets expensive when using the good shit, but they're worth it. Psh, who you telling? I always get they litter from Petco. You know what I'm saying? Because they got that big dumbass bin that you could just refill your buckets with and shit. I got like 4 buckets, you know. Yeah, I like Guns N' Roses. They all right. I have a Siamese dad and his son. The son is all black. Ooh, what's up with the son now? Cheers. Needs to be hotter. Shit. Do your thing. Huh. Lol. What's your favorite type of cat? A tiger. Yeah, it's got to be a tiger. But my favorite cat I have is Donnie B, the black cat. He sleep in a very gay way with Louis. Loopy and Donnie B. Yeah, it is. It's hot. You brought, I don't know what that means, Mario. Motherfucker. What the fuck are you doing? What the fuck are you doing? Jesus fucking Christ, man. Louis, look at your sister. Louis, you ain't sleeping with Donnie B? Oh, here you go. Did y'all not do that? Turn my motherfucking screen up. The fuck? Let me see what Hassan talking about. Now I'm about to watch the Vanguard, son. See what the Vanguard talking about. What up, Dade? Hope you're having a good day. Thanks, Cody. Just trying to fuck up the screen. Bro, fuck Hell's Kitchen. Mia, Brett, Ariel, and Mona each prepare their fourth and final tableside dish. Oh. I don't know if I want to watch that. Must. Yeah, probably. Uh-oh.
Anti-Semitism is unacceptable, as are all other forms of bigotry. There's a difference between anti-Semitism and people coming to the assumption on their own volition that Ethan might be defending Israel a little bit and therefore might have some Zionist opinions because of the past 12 months of an ongoing genocide and his
Ohio
centering himself as he looks to ban
I'm from Ohio, son. I'm in one of the dumbest states in fucking America. Need some more creamer. You ever been to Salem? Nah, I ordered some shit though. I ordered some shit from the Satanic Temple up there though. I want to visit the Satanic Temple for real, for real. Like I want to go bad. I'm just a broke bitch. Is he reacting to Philly D?
In that video, Ethan claims that Twitch harbors anti-Semites and actively ignores it. And as some evidence, he points out that Twitch recently unbanned Sneeko and Fresh and Fit for content creators that are I believe they're both banned now, by the way. So I hope that he mentions that. This was completely unacceptable for the record. This was so unimaginably unacceptable. I saw a clip that's really funny, though. Sneeko was saying that me, Pokimane, and XQC demanded he get banned because he's pro-Palestine.
Axolotl, 7-Eleven. Are you that kid? I think you're that kid. If so, I do remember you. Sure do. It's really nice. The high quality is basically an art gallery, library, wicked fun, talented general. Wait, what? Shit, me too. Born and raised. We might be neighbors. Bro, I'm in Dayton, Ohio. Well, technically it's Dayton. You know what I mean? But more specifically, I'm in Union? Like Inglewood, you know what I'm saying? Like that sort of area. What's up? Hold on. De La Crae? Medella? I probably said that totally wrong. I tried though. I know where you are. I'm in Cincinnati. Oh, okay. I was in Cincinnati not too long ago. You know what I mean? Like I was recently in Detroit, Chicago, Cleveland, Cincinnati, you know. But when I go to Cincinnati, I'm always like downtown and shit. Like I don't really go nowhere else. You know what I'm saying? I just be around where the hotel is, you know. Would you stop fucking with the screen shit? What up, Jay? Jesus Christ, fool! What the fuck? That's random. Carl Sagan, fool. Now what? What up, Kenster? What's good, Augers? Audio Cult? Love that badge on your hat. Oh, you like that shit? Say love. Yeah. Love. Love. What up, Draw Kill Dia the Punk Rock? What up, Jay? What up, 86 Crud? Not random, he knows the truth. You off the chain side. Bear said it was there for itself. Okay. So let it be memed. So let it be done. This on fire, bro. Straight fucking fire. Just that plex. You know what I mean? Because it's complex. Give me complex feelings. Give me a complex high. Call it that plex, baby. Smoking it plex. Smoking it plex. Whoa. Is that a spliff? Maybe. Maybe not. Maybe fuck yourself. Favorite show or movie? Come on now. My truest supporters know my favorite movie. I mean, it's kind of obvious what my favorite movie is, if you think about it. Or if you're over 35. Then you might get it. But I don't have a favorite show for real. Okay, no, I take that back. I do have a favorite show. My favorite show is The Line, son. At Q&A Line. The Line. So if you put in The Line, you know what I mean? You'll see their channel. And I'm a subscriber and a paid member of The Line. You know what I mean? The Line is an internet show. You know what I'm saying? Where typically theists call in to defend their God belief. Because the show is produced and hosted by atheists. Particularly Matt Dillahunty, Jimmy Snow, the lovely Arden Hart, fucking, and then like others, you know what I mean? Like Eve Was Framed, you know what I'm saying? You don't know Eve Was Framed? You need to get hit. Or Paula Gia, you know what I'm saying? Or sometimes they'll be having like guest hosts like Andrew Seidel, you know what I mean? Or fucking, or other motherfuckers, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, so it's like motherfuckers will call in and be like, and they'll ask you like, tell me, what do you believe and why? With the why being the more important part. So you'd be like, oh, I believe in the biblical God. They'll be like, all right, why do you believe that? And then usually they'll proceed to give some dumbass fucking response that he just butchered, he tear the motherfuckers apart. Like, bruh, cut it out. Fuck you mean? Like, well, where's your evidence for that? And they're like, the evidence is in the Bible. And he's like, that is not evidence, you dumbass. And he's like, that's the claim. We need extra biblical evidence, motherfucker. You know what I mean? And these motherfuckers don't be having shit. Like, they can't hold up to him, man. That's why I be clipping his shit so much. Like, Matt Dillahunty is the fucking GOAT, son. The GOAT. So, 1025 paper. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. 1025 paper. What does that even mean? 1025 paper. October 25th. Wait, is that what today is? What's today's date? Oh, shit, it is October 25th. Okay, that makes sense. On my lunch break at work and finally caught your live. Hi, Dad. You're awesome. Thanks, Wicked Whitney. You're wicked. Whitney. What if when I let the smoke out, it spelled Wicked Whitney? That'd have been dope as fuck. I'd have been like, oh shit, hold on now. Maybe there is a supernatural realm. What's up, May May? May May's mask. This shit's on fire, son. Where the motherfucking ashtray? Oh, there it go. I be tripping, son. Are you welcome? You know. Proof is in the Bible. Nah, son. If that's how evidence works, then guess what? Harry Potter is real, son. It is. It's in the book. Hogwarts is a real place. It's in the book. Therefore, okay. See, that's what you sound like. The evidence is in the book. Like, that's not evidence, bro. Dumbass. Careful. Good shizzle. Jay got timed out. Ex-UFC fighter that got banned because of meth abuse. Wow. Well, yeah. What did you think was going to happen? Hopefully you ain't still doing that shit. You know what I'm saying? My favorite color ain't even a color. My favorite color is black. You know what I mean? And black is just a shade or a tone. It's the absence of color. Or it's the inclusion of all colors. I don't know how you want to look at it. I'm just saying. but I'm not gonna rush you. Did Jesus live as a man? Well, a couple of things about that. I've learned in my research that apparently the name Jesus was quite common at that time. So, to answer the question, do I believe that a man named Jesus lived 2,000 years ago? I'm gonna be like, yes, I do believe that. Okay. No big deal there. I don't have any problem conceding to that. You know what I mean? Haha, might as well. My mom shouldn't watch you, but I don't care. Why your mom hating on a player? Hating on a player. Hating on a player. Hating on a player. Why? I'm a good influence. I only encourage motherfuckers to read, do some research, some analysis. Perhaps engage in some skepticism, some critical thinking. You know, that's all. That's what's wrong with that. You know, I don't encourage people to do drugs or nothing like that. You know what I mean? You ain't got to do it unless you want to. In which case, don't be stingy. Share it with me, motherfucker. Share it with me, motherfucker. Critical thinking is a good thing to do. I agree. I ain't judging your grammar. We in the chat, man. We in the live. I'm not judging your grammar. I ain't judging nobody's grammar. That's just for the motherfuckers that be talking shit. You know what I'm saying? That is just for them. You know what I mean? Like, they be talking shit. I'm like, man, hold on, dog. And by talking shit, I mean they could just be like on some preachy shit, not even to me. And I'm just like, nope. If I catch it, I'm pointing it out. There's a flaw in this house. There's a flaw in this house. When I see it, I point it out. You know what I mean? Big or Big L? That's a Big L. What you mean? The fuck? Big L all day. Period. Like the period. That's not even a question. Like, in my opinion, you know, it's not even a question. You could be like Big L or Tupac, Big L. Big L or Cassidy, Big L. Big L or Jay-Z, Big L. Like, I don't know what to tell y'all. Big L. Man, if y'all don't know who Big L is, y'all better look up Big L. Big, letter L. You know what I'm saying? Big L. Look him up on YouTube. Look at his old shit, his street strut. You know what I'm saying? Casualties of a Dice Game. You know what I mean? Or the song he did with Tupac. I forget what it's called, but I mean, he got his whole catalog of shit is fire. Like bars, bruh. Like, Big L is the GOAT. Like, on the bars, period. Big L, straight up. Yeah, he was the truth, man. I still be playing Big L. Like, motherfuckers don't be hit for real. Yeah, I agree, Sonny. Big L all day. That's right, Kenster. I hope your day is good. Thanks, Draw Kill. It's all right. Yeah, I mean, love the profile pic. Good looking out, Harley. You know, it's just me. It's this. It's on my shirt. Yeah, I mean, it's just me going like this. Yeah, that's all it is. But the background picture is just like all my rings like up close, just like in a line and shit. What's up, Spain and Puerto reunite? Yo, so what's up? But so like I got all my rings from Gothic.com. Gothic without the O. GTH. It's basically G thick. GTHIC.com. That's where I got all my shit. Because they got said like they got like buy one, like buy two, get one free, buy three, get two free, some shit. I don't fucking know. But like they always got the sale going, like it's forever on. So I be taking them up on that sometimes. You know, I got rings I don't even wear. Like I still have them. I started to give them to like some coworker of mine, but I didn't know how you felt about one dude giving another dude some rings and shit. Like I don't know how he felt about that. And then I felt weird, even like when I was thinking about it, I'm like, wait a minute. I don't know how I would feel about that if like some dude was like, yo, I got these rings for you. I'd be like, you so weird, so ring peddling ass way for me, motherfucker. Like, I don't know. So that's why I didn't do it. So I still got them, you know. But what's up, Psyche Tarot? All right, Wicked Whitney, have a good day at work. You know. Blam. All right, let's get back into it. In the previous chapter, we saw that accepting the resurrection would force us to abandon a set of standards for evidence and belief formation that serve us perfectly well in other cases, like the Salem witch trials. Believing in the resurrection is at odds with our reasonable rejection of real magic at Salem. The consistent and correct answer is to reject both. We may still wonder, however, about the details of what makes it unreasonable to believe in magic at Salem and in miracles at Jerusalem. The central question can be put this way. Given the quality and quantity of information we have, what conclusion should a reasonable, educated 21st century person draw about Jesus and the allegations that he returned from the dead? The specific problem we must consider in this chapter is the reliability of first century people from whom the information about the resurrection originated. The information about Jesus is transmitted to us through a series of people, their words, and their writings. The events themselves are first in the chain. Then, from those, we can distinguish five kinds of links in the chain. There's the alleged witness, the people who originally claimed to witness the events and then reported them. Then there is the reporters. The repeaters. Whoops. The immediate group who repeated that story until it was written down decades later. Then there were the authors, the writers of the biblical books. Then there were the copyists, the people who copied and recopied the works until some of those copies survived to reach us. And then there was the canonizers, the people who culled the books of the modern Bible out of the many Christian writings that proliferated in the early centuries of the religious movement. We can look at the oldest surviving documents from these people and see for ourselves what they say. So, in effect, surviving copies make it possible for us to jump over centuries and avoid some questions about transmission fidelity, copying errors, or manipulation that might have occurred since those copies were made. An actual document from the 4th century instead of from the 8th century, for example, is that much closer to the events, reducing some of our concerns about what may have intervened between the 4th and 8th centuries. Let's consider some clusters of problems relevant to each of the links in the chain, and if there are real doubts undermining our confidence in each of these stages of transmission, the net effect will be the accumulation of all the doubts that intervene between us and the alleged events. In Chapter 5, we'll consider how doubts amplify when they accumulate and are considered together. The alleged eyewitnesses. How reliable are eyewitnesses to miracles? It varies with the type of information in question. My reliability for information about NFL football is much poorer than my reliability for information about the history of philosophy. People are pretty good at making trajectory estimates for thrown objects, but they're quite bad at making compound estimates of probability that involve more than a few variables. We might trust a medieval source to inform us about the starting and ending dates for a significant battle, but if the same source recommends trepanation as a cure for the bubonic plague because a hole drilled in the skull relieves the evil demons, we would be more reluctant to take this claim to be true, no matter how authentic or well corroborated the claim is. The cases in which we are interested are the cases where people have encounters leading them to claim that some miraculous, supernatural, or spiritually and physically extraordinary event has occurred. How reliable are people at relaying this sort of information? At first glance, it may seem like a very difficult question to answer. It's hard to know how many real miracles there are or how many reports there are. Our habit is to trust people as sources of information about their own reliability. That is, not only do we believe many of the things people say, we also take a person's claims about our own reliability as a useful indicator of our reliability, especially when there is no other way to corroborate. When I see something and become certain that it happened, it's very difficult for me to imagine that I am mistaken about it. My own feelings of certainty are compelling to me. And when we imagine being in a position like the first Christians are alleged to have been, it's similarly difficult to imagine they could be wrong when they seem to have been or so utterly convinced. In general, people give high marks to their own abilities, including the ability to judge the truth about events they have seen. When you ask people how good they are at judging character, for example, they're quite confident. If the question were put to you, you might recall believing someone was a certain way, for example, that your friend's husband was trustworthy or suspicious or foolish. Then you will recall instances where that judgment seemed to apply accurately, and thus your initial judgment was validated. So here's the question. How good are you at judging character? Here's the answer. I'm pretty good. When I met Maria's husband for the first time, I could just tell that something was not right with that guy. And look how that turned out. I can't believe he buried so many bodies in that basement. Some of the problems should be obvious. To get an accurate judgment of your reliability, we would need to know your failure rate too, and the success failure. Slash the failure. Let's back up. To get an accurate judgment of your reliability, we would need to know your failure rate and the success slash failure rate of others at a similar task. And then we could compare your real rate with a baseline for other people. Consider a clear example. Suppose Mr. Munchausen claims he is very good at predicting the outcome of college basketball games. To figure out how good he actually is, we would need a reliable, objective method for gathering several pieces of information. We can't simply take his word for it or his memories about his successes. We would need an accurate record of all his predictions, not just the one he remembers or the ones he got right. Then we would need an accurate record of the actual outcomes of all the basketball games for which he made a prediction. When we compare these two, we might discover that he correctly predicts the outcome 65% of the time. That is, he is only mistaken about the winner in 35 out of 100 cases. Would that confirm his special skill? Well, not quite. It may be that other fans are just as good at making these predictions, or it could be worse. It could be that other fans typically outperform his predictions. Their average success rate may be 75%, in which case he appears to be bad at the task. The point is that the data about his success rate alone doesn't tell us much. For all we know, other people can accurately predict the games 90% of the time. Suppose Munchausen's success rate is 45%. That means he's actually doing worse than random chance or simply guessing. We need his we need his numerator, the number of games he correctly predicted, and his denominator, the number of games he predicted rightly or wrongly, in order to attach a value to his reliability. He may claim to have a special method for determining the winner, but the method actually makes him do worse than he would otherwise. And we wouldn't know that until we looked at both ratios. If one person's ability is better than others, then we should find some evidence of it in objective blind testing. If we compared Munchausen's prediction rate to the rates of other fans and non-fans and found that his rating was, on average, much better than both groups, then we might conclude that he's good at predicting games. But no matter how well he compares to other people, if his rate is not above 50%, then his predictions will actually be a better indicator of who will not win the game. That is, we could do better by just guessing, or we could do even better by choosing the opposite of his pick. It is possible to do something familiar for people's reliability with regard to miracle reports. For miracle testimony reliability, first, it would be valuable to know how often people claim to have witnessed a miracle. Second, in those cases where they reported one, we need to know how often a miracle really happened. And third, we need to know how often they witness a real miracle but do not claim to have seen one. Most of us think that reporting a miracle is a relatively or exceedingly rare thing. People don't just claim such a thing very often. And most of us probably think that real miracles are exceedingly rare too, although this estimate will vary significantly from person to person. Your rough subjective estimate of miracle reporting reliability for people will be a function of how frequently you think people make miracle claims and how often you think they're correct. There will be a real objective rate depending on the real number of reports and the real number of occurrences, but perhaps only an omniscient God will know those numbers. We have to do the best with what we've got. It would be valuable then to consider these first two values. Fortunately, we can do better than mere subjective best guessing on the basis of personal experience by considering some cases like Lourdes, France, where miracle reports and miracles appear to be common. Hey, Louis, shut the fuck up. Since 1858, when Bernadette Soubirous claimed to have seen an apparition of the Virgin Mary in Lourdes, France, people have sought the waters from a nearby spring and a rocky cliff. By some estimates, there have been at least 80,000 pilgrims a year for over a century, totaling over 8 million people who have gone there. Other estimates put the total number of visitors at 200 million. Out of those millions of visitors, many have had what they thought was a miraculous experience. A special spiritual event or healing. And a number of those experiences have been submitted to an official investigating body of the Roman Catholic Church to determine if they were really miracles. As of now, out of the thousands of cases that have considered, 67 miracles have been declared to be real by the Lourdes Medical Bureau, which is made up of church-appointed clergy and doctors who select themselves to serve. For now, let's treat those 67 as real. What the number suggests is that for every officially recognized miracle, there are hundreds of thousands or even millions of cases where someone thinks a miracle has occurred, but that claim would not pass muster, even with the favorably inclined church-appointed investigating board. Now we must engage in some educated guesswork. Out of the 8 million to 200 million visitors to Lourdes over the decades, how many of them had an experience of something that they took to be a miraculous or supernatural event? Surely there have been many people who have gone and did not notice or feel anything special, but no doubt There have been far more who went with high expectations after having heard about the special miraculous occurrences that are common there, and who saw, felt, heard, or experienced something that they took to be of a divine origin. Let's make the conservative conjecture that half of the low estimate of total visitors, or 4 million people, thought that something miraculous from a spiritual source happened to them. If there are good reasons to revise the number up or down, then we can do so. Unless this estimate is off by whole orders of magnitude, then the conclusion of this argument will be similar. If there are 67 real miracles and 4 million alleged miracles out of 8 million to 200 million visitors, then the general miracle reliability rating for visitors to Lourdes is 0.0000167%. That is, without any other information, if someone from Lourdes claims to have witnessed the miracle, then there is a 99.999833% probability that it didn't happen. Recalling our previous point about Mr. Munchausen, the result here means that in general, when someone claims a miracle has occurred, his claim is a far stronger indicator that it didn't happen than it did. We need not be strongly committed to the 0.0016% rating. There is much we don't know, but what the rating does make clear is that the error rate is enormous, even if we're charitable and grant that a number of dubious miracles are real. People make many miracle and supernatural claims. Nearly 1 in 5 Americans with they dumbasses believe that he receives direct answers to his prayers once a week. But we now have numerous well-designed studies showing that prayer has no effect. So that amounts to about 60 million new false miracle claims a week. In addition to Lourdes and unanswered prayers, there are alleged sightings of ghosts, psychic contact with the dead, clairvoyance, supernatural interventions, and countless other supernatural events on the planet every day. Millions of people in India claim to have witnessed statues drinking milk from saucers, or others see tears fall from the eyes of statues of the Virgin Mary, or images of her images of her face in their food. That'd be weird. They saw her feet in their food. Like, how you know it's hers? Anyway, in the United States, over 100 million people believe that houses can be haunted. There is no hope for America, dude. We're fucking cooked. Like, what? What? Are these 100 million people children? Like, what the fuck are we talking about here? In the United States, let me read that again. In the United States, over 100 million people believe that houses can be haunted. Wow. That is a large number of people. I didn't know that many people believe that shit. 35 to 40 million people believe that astrology works. Oh, man. Wow. Wow, okay. And over 60 million, or 20% of people, believe in communicating mentally with the dead. The point is that mistaken supernatural claims are exceedingly common, but any real supernatural events are orders of magnitude more rare. In informal discussions with students in my classes over the years, a majority claim to have seen at some point something spooky, supernatural, or that defied the ordinary natural course of things. But it's very rare to hear of an example where there is not an obvious and better natural explanation. On any given day in the United States, there are thousands or possibly hundreds of thousands of faith healers who are holding faith healing revivals. Some of these revivals take place in huge stadiums where 10, 20, or even 30,000 seats are filled. During the events, hundreds or even thousands of people will stream down to the front to be healed by the preacher. Hundreds or thousands more will have what they take to be intense spiritual and physical healing experiences in their seats. None of these appears to be real or to be able to stand up to any significant critical examination. In other cases, people watching prayer and healing sessions conducted by televangelists on cable television stations will experience what they take to be miraculous healings. Evangelist preachers like Pat Robertson, Robert Tilton, Benny Hinn, and countless others sustain their multi-million-dollar ministries on the donations of these hopeful watchers. The vast majority of these alleged miracles go unreported, except perhaps to family and friends. So across the country, every day there will be millions of people who are experiencing what they take to be miracles. A tiny fraction of these will get reported. Even fewer will be investigated with any serious scrutiny. James, the amazing Randy, a renowned skeptic, has been conducting a $1 million paranormal challenge for many years for anyone who can, quote, show proof under proper observing conditions, evidence of any paranormal, supernatural, or occult power or event. To date, hundreds of people, including many claiming to have healing powers, have attempted to demonstrate their abilities and to satisfy some rudimentary observation requirements in Randy's tests. All have been resounding failures. Of the millions of daily cases where someone thinks he or she has experienced a miracle, how many of them are real? We can't know for sure, but we should not be optimistic. It should be obvious to any reasonable and mildly skeptic person that the vast majority of them are not real. Cases of known fraud, mistakes, enthusiasm, confusion, delusion, placebo effect, confirmation bias, urban mythology, hoaxes, and failures of scientific protocols such as double-blind controls should lead us to be very skeptical. Even if you believe that miracles are real and happen often, the examples above show that vastly more of the reports are wrong than right. If someone is dissatisfied with the 0.0016% estimate from the Lord's case, then we have to ask, what's a better estimate justified by the empirical evidence? We must keep in mind that this percentage is not the rate of miracles, but the comparison of the number of times someone thinks or claims something supernatural has occurred, contrasted to the number of times it actually did. How reliable are people about these sorts of events? 1 in 1 million? 1 in 1,000? 1 in 10? The evidence suggests that at the very least, the rate is millions to 1, probably worse. If the critic believes that human testimony about miracles is generally more reliable, then the obvious challenge will be to produce these real cases of miracles or other supernatural events that will push the numerator up and change the low estimate justified by the examples above. Consider the evidence you have for the numerator and the denominator, and keep this in mind for our next step. Believing in the supernatural. Hold up. What other factors should inform our assessment of the reliability of the alleged witnesses to the miracles of Jesus? Here's an important question. Would the early followers of Jesus have been more or less reliable about reporting miraculous events than the people at Lourdes or the people in recent American polls? The answer: they would have been much less reliable because of who they were and when they lived. Let's consider how disposed a person is in general to accept or reject claims about supernatural entities, forces, or events. We can call this her supernatural belief threshold. If the threshold is low, she is more readily disposed to believe supernatural claims are true. For whatever reasons, she's inclined to accept claims about events that transcend or violate the natural order more readily, with less evidence or with less skepticism. Let's imagine that Gloria has a low SBT, supernatural belief threshold. In the course of her life, just like the rest of us, she encounters claims about supernatural events. Gloria sees a headline on the cover of a magazine at the supermarket about the psychic powers of Sylvia Brown, who claims to be able to speak to the dead. She has a friend who says he saw what he thought was a ghost one night when he was alone in an old house. She had a lucid dream of a conversation with her grandfather the night after he died. She sees a news story about reports of a statue at a nearby church that appears to be crying. Gloria is more disposed to accept these stories at face value, whereas someone with a high standard of belief, supernatural belief threshold, would consider alternative explanations, think of objections, or otherwise just be more fucking skeptical. As a result, there will be a group of these claims Gloria believes are true that we can contrast to the ones that really are. As with other matters, there are lots of false claims circulating out there. Even if there are many supernatural events occurring out there, not all of the reports about them will be accurate. Rumors, urban myths, mistakes, and sensationalism have their effect. Even Gloria will acknowledge that not everything she hears is true. But since her supernatural belief threshold is low, Gloria's error rate with regard to supernatural claims would be high. She will conclude that miracles, ghosts, or strange happenings are more common than they really are. If there were supernatural ideas circulating about that were false or unfounded, a person like Gloria would be more likely to believe them anyway and repeat them. That is, if you were to take her word for it, a person with a low supernatural belief threshold would mislead you, perhaps not intentionally, in the direction of accepting more of those claims that are actually true. If you have a friend who is utterly dedicated to the Detroit Lions and who believes they will win every game in the coming season, he is likely to be right for at least some of the games. But he believes those truths at the cost of many false beliefs. As they say, even a broken clock gets the time right twice a day. Bah! And if you believed all of his testimony, his errors would become your own. We can also put the point in terms of a person's skepticism, doubtfulness, or disposition toward critical scrutiny. If a person habitually reflects on the evidence with care, makes a conscious and careful effort to gather the broadest body of relevant evidence, and actively seeks out disconfirming grounds for a claim, that, all other things being equal, is favorable with regard to their trustworthiness as a source of information. If a person whose skepticism is high becomes satisfied that it is true, then you could be more confident that it is true than you would be if your source for the same claim was someone whose skepticism is generally low. Of course, skepticism can go too far if someone has the opposite problem from Gloria's, and there are some supernatural claims that are true. This person would misrepresent reality in the direction of concurring with too many false claims of the type that are in fact true. And if someone's threshold for believing certain kinds of claims is out of whack with reality, then she becomes an unreliable source of information about these claims in either direction. Ideally, a source's supernatural belief threshold would produce a set of supernatural beliefs that match reality as closely as possible. With respect to my main thesis, the lesson here for the Jesus case is that there are many influences that push our thresholds for believing certain kinds of claims away from where they should be for maximum accuracy. Enthusiasm, desire, ideological commitments, emotional attachments, poor critical thinking skills, misinformation, and a host of other factors lead us to accept or reject different types of claims on the basis of faulty or inconsistent standards. When he makes a good roll, the gambler is highly inclined to think that his secret method for winning at the craps table works. He's inclined to take away, or he's inclined to take any win that would have happened anyway, and even some near misses at winning as confirmation that his system works. When she finds some incriminating evidence, the worried wife grasps for reasons to think that her husband is not cheating on her and clings to that account long after his infidelity has become clear to those who are not so invested. If the arguments of this book thus far had been undermining the legitimacy of non-Christian religious miracles, a Christian might be much more sympathetic. If you are a Protestant, consider parallel arguments against Catholic or Mormon miracles, and vice versa. If I were a visiting preacher in a Christian church presenting the very same arguments from this book against the historical foundations of Islam, chances are the skepticism about the reliability of the Quran would be warmly received. There are several points to make here about first and second century Christians. Generally, people living in an agrarian Iron Age society with very low levels of scientific knowledge, education, and literacy will have a low level of skepticism for what we would identify as supernatural, miraculous, or paranormal claims. We have good empirical evidence that as a person's education level increases, their belief in survival of the soul, miracles, heaven, the resurrection, the virgin birth, hell, the devil, ghosts, astrology, and raindrops being reincarnated. Wait, what? Oh, and reincarnation drops off dramatically. Oh, okay, I'm tripping. Religiousness, superstition, and supernaturalism are positively correlated. Oh, I love it. Religiousness, I'm gonna probably post that in my thing. Religiousness, superstition, and supernaturalism are positively correlated with ignorance. When people have more education, they are less likely to believe. I'm gonna pause it right there. Okay. Pause it right now. Mostly because I'm hungry, bruh. I just got off work. Why didn't I just get off? But I am hungry. So, peace. Thanks, Bear, for moderating, man. I appreciate you, homie. You're gonna have to like send me your PayPal or something so I can like financially compensate you for your work. Just like fucking like email me or some shit. Or fucking like just hit up my PayPal, just like send a request or something. I don't fucking know. But my PayPal is at TI Sleep. It's short for the infamous Sleep because that was my nickname when I was in the military. My nickname was Sleepy, but they would just call me Sleep for short. Mostly because I look like this most of the time, and people just thought I was sleepy, or was always. Actually, when they gave me the nickname, I was asleep. They had to wake me up to tell me what it was. So I was like, oh, well, that's accurate. Everyone's nicknames are accurate. Like the tall dude called him Slim, of course. We had this one dude whose name sounded like tampon if you said it in his language. Like, I think he spoke Spanish or whatever. But like his name sounded like tampon, so we called him Tampon. And then we had this one dude who I just thought was a white dude, but apparently he was like Hispanic, but there was no like evidence of that except for like his name. But anywho, like he had like long blonde hair and shit. And so we called him Sunshine from like the character from the Remember the Titans, because he had to like cut all his hair off and be like the rest of us and shit. But he had like long, blonde, beautiful hair. Oh, no problem, cuz. You know, atheism is all I've been able to see of the cover. Oh, Atheism and the Case Against Christ by Matthew S. McCormick. You know what I mean? It's not a very big book. Let's let me see the actual reading. Wow, we're okay. So let's back up. We're already at the notes. So the book ends at page 288. Yeah, so it's only 288 pages. It's not, that's nothing. I'll probably read that 3 more times. You know what I mean? But before we get to, and what page am I on? I'm only on page 80. So got a ways to go. I know, right? Tampon was funny. We was like, but he was a fucking, that dude was an asshole. Like, so look, when we was like graduating basic training, we got like that book that like they gave everybody or whatever. I don't know if we had to pay for it or not. I don't remember, but anyway, once we got it was like our yearbook or some shit, and we was like passing it around to like each of us to like sign and shit. This dumbass gonna put something like "fuck you, lick my balls," some shit like that. You know what I mean? I was like, what if he didn't gonna sign his name? I'm like, what a fucking asshole, bro. Like he was so stupid. That was kind of like his like catchphrase almost. It was like he would always say that shit. But he would say that sometimes to the drill sergeants. That's why he was always in trouble. Like, but yeah, it's just like, fuck you, look my boss. I'm like, damn, dog, what the fuck? Like, but we just thought that shit was funny. Like every time he said it, we was fucking cracking up. Fucking tampon. Shit, I missed the name of the book. Atheism and the Case Against Christ by Matthew S. McCormick. 288 pages, as we've earlier ascertained. So far, it's good. I'm not trying to sound gay, but I adore Jade. I adore you back. I don't care if it sounds gay or not. You know what I mean? Who gives a shit? Don't be so homophobic. Okay. Sweet, thank you. No problem. Yeah. I'm trying to think what I'm gonna eat though. What do I even have? I'm about to make like a ham sandwich. You know what I mean? Maybe. I don't fucking know. I had this one shit last night. It was like some kind of fucking, it was a taco wrap. That's what it was called. Like from like this little fancy fucking, well, it's not fancy. It's like a little cafe in this neighborhood that I ain't never been to. But the food is, hey, that shit was, yo, that shit slap. But I don't know. I don't know if I want to go back there. Yeah, I don't know. They right around the corner, so I might have to. Yeah. What up? Who was that? What up? Yeah. I don't know how you say your name. But what up? You you came in at the end of my stream. I was on here reading and shit. This book. Barcode, bro. There you go. I want to cover the light. Hold on. It's cheap ass Walmart light. You was there. Did you see somebody suing Taco Bell because of false advertisement? Well, I mean, no, I didn't see that. They probably won't win, though. Probably set it out in arbitration or some shit. Oh, no. What time is it? Oh, it's only 4 o'clock. Really? It's only 4 o'clock? Nuh-uh. It's only 4 o'clock. I feel like I've been... Not... All right. All right. Anyway, I gotta make some more content. Yeah, I'm about to get off here. Fuck, I almost broke my motherfucking phone doing that. Hey, good looking out. Bear. I'm gonna holler back. You can catch me on the line in the comments if they have a live chat. Assuming that the line is on. But all right.